do not pass go. Now, don't click off the video just yet. Let me just explain to you what we are getting into today. I have something to say, and I'm not going to be nice. This video is going to be petty and rude and pretty much all of the things that you probably think it is from the title. This isn't clickbait. I'm basically going to break every rule in the rule book when it comes to being a book content creator, where I'm not gonna be conscientious of other people's feelings and I'm just gonna express my opinion. This is something I usually do pretty regularly anyway, but like this video especially is gonna be one people should not watch if you cannot handle other people having opinions that are in complete disagreement of your own. So basically, I'm gonna be just like an absolute hater for X amount of minutes, so if you wanna watch that, cool, hang out with me. But, if you can't handle someone being salty as fuck for several minutes, get the fuck out now. All right, so now that we're all on the same page, let's chat. If you're new here, my name's Maddie. Welcome to my channel. I hope your day is going well. And today we're gonna talk about the subgenre of a romance, romantasy. Now, some of you might be thinking that the subgenre should be a fantasy because it's romantasy, but no, I fully believe this is a romance genre, and I don't have anything against the romance genre, but I'm a fantasy reader. And as you will come to find out, the influx of this subgenre is causing me frustration. What is romantasy? Let's ask Google. Romantasy is a portmanteau of romance and fantasy, and it's used to refer to the fantasy romance genre. You might also hear writers call the genre romantic fantasy. Romantasy can take place in either a high fantasy world or a low fantasy setting. I just think that the word portmanteau is funny, so I wanted to include that. From my understanding of this like overhyped, personally, subgenre, is that it's a story with romance at the center set in a fantasy world. Which, considering I describe myself as a fantasy reviewer, I don't particularly like that. Focus being not on the world building, but just on the romantic tension causes me a lot of frustrations when I'm reading a book that I thought would have an interesting fantasy setting as well as a romance. Do not get me wrong, I have read a shit ton of romantasies over the course of my reading life, especially being on YouTube. I can almost chronicle the exact moment this genre was created, and I will be talking about that in this video. Look, I am aware that I am the demographic for this genre. I'm an almost 30 white lady with 2.5 cats and a sex life that could be like better, let's be real. I know why this genre exists, and I know why I've read a lot of it. I have not always been a hater of this subgenre. I have been around the block. I have seen this subgenre become what it is today. Now, feel free to disagree with me, but I think that the modern romantasy fad originated with a little-known series called A Court of Thorns and Roses. It's like super niche. You probably have never even heard of it. Now, I've made several videos on the ACOTAR series at this point. I actually read the first book relatively quickly after it came out, and it was a book that I gave, I think, 5 stars to. Which shocks everyone, I'm sure. But this is actually very similar story-wise to everyone else, I think, as this book got me back into reading YA. I had kind of started really only reading high fantasy, didn't really click with reading as much anymore. When I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, it was so easily digestible that I just devoured it in like one sitting. And yes, you did just hear me correctly. A Court of Thorns and Roses was published in YA. I mentioned that people tend to get a little confused. I don't know if you've read this super niche series or not, but like there is a crap ton of space in this series. It's fucking erotica. Like it's just, there's smut in this series. That doesn't mean that it's a bad series. It's just mostly what this series is known for at this point. Which is something I actually mentioned about this first book, A Court of Thorns and Roses, even though the smuttiness doesn't actually pick up until the second book. But I mentioned that this was like more sexually charged for a YA book than I initially expected. And I also referred to Feyre as a interestingly flawed heroine, which was a plot twist that I didn't expect because she is probably my most hated main character, except for maybe Violet from Dark Wing, Fourth Wing, the Wing book. For a little bit more context, this series, even though it's like very little known and no one really has ever heard about it, when I worked for a little known bookstore chain called Bernays and Noble, I had to sell this book series quite a bit to people who had teenagers and or younger because it was in the YA section. So I had to have a lot of conversations with parents about, hey, have you had the conversation about the birds and bees? Because you about to if you buy this series for your child. Which the topic of like smut in YA books or like young readers finding erotica before a certain point is not the topic of this video. But just bear in mind, this series was written for an audience of younger readers. So the way that it's written is incredibly youthful and done so on purpose for the audience it was originally sold to. It was such a cultural shift for me because when I went back and reread Twilight a couple of years ago, I had forgotten that in Breaking Dawn, there is not a on-page sex scene. Like, there wasn't a plethora of YA books with on-page sex scenes until 2015. Like, that was not something that was happening as extensively as it is now. Like, for real, I thought we got a description of Edward's icicle penis, but apparently that did not happen. Speaking of Twilight, the paranormal craze in YA was huge, and it was only like unseated by the dystopian craze that came quickly after it. And then after the dystopian craze died out, from around 2012, 2013 up until 2016, there was kind of this like slow decline in young adult, where after all of these huge series that had like really boosted the publishing world, there wasn't really something that was driving people back into reading anymore. Around this time, Cassandra Clare and Leigh Bardugo started announcing a lot of like adult titles, and there was a big push for new adult to become a thing. And if you're not familiar with what new adult is, it's what basically people were trying to do with the YA section, just adding smut scenes. Like, it kind of makes sense on paper, but at the same time, it became very difficult to get that to be a recognizable like audience market because there just isn't a easy transition between young adult and like adult books. Personally, my thing is if you are an adult and you are reading either a young adult book or an adult book, you should be able to know the difference of what the content is, right? Romance-heavy plot lines in fantasy books have never been a non-entity. That's always been a thing, but there's always been kind of a balance between the fantasy aspect and the romance aspect until something happened that Gollum could not have expected. Indie publishing. I want to be very, very clear. I do not have any issues with indie published authors. The publishing industry is gatekeep to shit, so if you find a loophole and you're able to publish your book on your own, go for it. That's awesome. I am proud of you for that. And people are reading these clearly unedited, under-researched, half-baked, self-insert fantasies and considering them to be really well written. Since the world changed dramatically during COVID, I do think like Kindle Unlimited especially helped indie authors get as much recognition as possible because people were at home, they weren't going out and buying physical books, and it just became an easier process to get your book published, and trends came from there. Around this time is also when TikTok became really, really good at making a singular book a huge fucking sensation. So flash forward to now, we are inundated with a bunch of books all about fairies having sex, which is not in and of itself the problem. The problem that I do have with these stories is that they are written like they're intended for 7th graders. And they have the cringiest fucking sex scenes I've ever read in my life. Additionally to that, a lot of these series have issues with dubious or just straight up non-consent scenes. And I do believe that that's probably a trickle-down effect of YA paranormal romances and then like into like the 50 Shades of Grey popularity, because for some reason a lot of these romances rely on the concept that the woman doesn't have to actually speak out loud what she wants. Once again, a whole other video topic. Let's keep going. The reason that I wanted to do this video is because I tried reading this book. This book has a Mad Libs title that I'm not even going to try and fucking say because it's confusing as hell. I got about 100 pages into this and I got tired I got tired because I knew exactly what was happening in every fucking scene. I knew exactly how cringy the relationship was gonna be. I could not understand the world because it was clear that the like care that the world was given was nil at best. And additionally, it was reading like someone had just smacked their head against a fucking typewriter. I know this is yucking people's yum. That is, I know that sorry, this is an opinion. If you like this book, if you made it this far, like, I'm sorry, it doesn't work for me anymore. Let's be clear. I got tired of paranormal romances. I got tired of dystopian. Actually, really, really quick. I didn't really like dystopian. And now I'm tired of romantasy. I even got tired of the ripoffs of Game of Thrones. Like, I burn out on these series that are so similar to everything, and now romantasy for me is a genre that I would like to rip my eyeballs out before reading another one of. Biggest reason that I have an issue with romantasy is because these books are all carbon copies of each other. Don't get me wrong, a lot of book series have been inspired by other book series. That's just a fact. There's a saying that there's no new ideas under the sun, you just make things up as you go, and inspiration is obviously the highest form of flattery. But for me, it gets so frustrating when I'm reading a story and I know that the reason that the book is popular is because the author didn't have to do any work characterizing their own characters. They just borrowed characters from other places. Darkwing. Fourth Wing. I keep calling it Darkwing. Here's the thing, if all you're doing is taking the same character and giving him a slightly different fantasy power and calling it a day, it's still the same fucking character. And especially when every single one of these series has like this weird fetish for East Asian men, it's getting weird. Like that's not, like, are we uncomfortable? I'm uncomfortable. You guys should, like, I feel like we should be aware of this. On top of that, Sarah J Maas is being rightly criticized once again. And I definitely think that there are several issues with the way that she conducts her social media presence, let's just say. There was a TikTok that I saw where someone was saying that, like, oh, her books are diverse, so we should shut up and just deal with the way they're written, which, yikes. And also, no. I do not think Sarah J Maas is a bad person. I think that she is a writer and that she has done very well for herself. But I do think that there is a worrying concept for people in my age bracket refusing to read anything other than fairy smut. Now, my biggest thing is, in this situation, is that you can do whatever the fuck you want. You can read whatever the fuck you want. But if you're only reading from an author who used the death of Breonna Taylor to market her book, maybe you should think about diversifying your reading tastes. I am going to be a huge hypocrite here because I do thoroughly plan on reading the next Crescent City book. Not because I enjoy it, but because I have a small business on the internet where I talk about fairy dicks and you guys watch. Like, do I think the people that enjoy these books are stupid? No. I do not. I think a lot of people read these books as escapism, and I think that that is awesome. I do think that anybody reading for anything is awesome. What I don't want to do anymore is read any more of these books. And fortunately, weirdly enough, you guys seem to be liking it when I read dark romance books, which, weirdly enough, is something that I have not as many issues with anymore, because as someone who enjoys fantasy books that are well written, I don't give a fuck about dark romance in any span of the imagination. But I do think reading dark romance is probably worse for my health, to be honest, but I do have other videos planned on dark romance series that are hopefully going to be coming out soon. This video was just me ranting about the fact that I'm really tired of low effort world building and really, really problematic romances being the most popular thing and being shoved down my throat every time I open TikTok. But it's just me being salty. That there was really no point to this video, to be honest. So the person that left me a comment about how they just read for fun and they're not reading to, like, analyze a book, good for you. I don't give a fuck what you read for. I read to analyze things because I'm a fucking reviewer. So yeah, I'm probably not gonna read any fantasy romances anytime soon, but I will hit you guys up hopefully with another video about a dark romance inspired by maybe Criminal Minds. So like, subscribe, all the good stuff. Bye!